For well over 2 centuries, the US Postal Service has promised daily delivery. There's something going on, it appears, where some of the mail that should take a day is taken a week. Sometimes it's taken weeks and months. To what do you attribute that?
There's probably multiple reasons.
This week, our full measure investigation, Snail Mail, raising bigger questions about a badly broken system.
If I could give the schools back to Iowa and Idaho and Indiana and all these places that run properly.
President Trump wants to turn education back to the states, and he's naming names.
What did you think when you heard that?
Word travels fast when the president of our country gives a shout out to our state.
The buzzsaw effect and antics of the Department of Government Efficiency cuts both ways in Congress.
These are people's lives. Have a little, just a smidgen of empathy, maybe?
I'm 100% aligned with Elon, Doge, and President Trump.
This week, 2 outspoken members of Congress about the cuts and consequences. Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. 250 years into its existence, the US Postal Service is at a pivotal crossroads, stuck in a dead letter pile of delays, deficits, and doubt, with $9.5 billion in losses last year alone, and mail sometimes taking weeks just across town. Today, a Full Measure investigation has exclusive inside information and photos in our cover story, Snail Mail. The first thing you should know is, if you think your mail delivery has been sluggish, it's not your imagination. Is it taking longer than it did when you were in the 1980s?
It absolutely is taking longer than 1980s.
Mark Dimenstein is president of the American Postal Workers Union. He's helping us dig into the delays dragging down deliveries. There's something going on, it appears, where some of the mail that should take a day is taken a week. Sometimes it's taken weeks and months. To what do you attribute that?
There's probably multiple reasons. Some of it is this challenging transition. Some of it is short staffing.
The mail trail to today's mess is a long and winding route.
Farewell, Pony. Modern methods to move a mountain of mail far faster than any man in your era could have ever dreamed possible.
The U.S. Postal Service has been a cornerstone of American communication since it was created in 1775 under the first Postmaster General, Benjamin Franklin.
Letters are most important, so Mr. Dolan sorts them first. He puts the letters for each family in their own place.
In 1970, the USPS transitioned from a government department to an independent entity.
Sacks are opened and the mail spews out. After coding, this magnetic ink reading machine sorts the letters completely automatically.
Modern automation promised to zip mail to every U.S. address, while the USPS remained financially self-supporting. But in modern times, it's delivered a troubling decline in speed and cost-effectiveness. The USPS aims for 95% on-time delivery, but stretched on time from 3 days to 5 in 2021 as part of cost-cutting measures. This year's first quarter claimed 86% success, but self-reported stats lacking independent proof leave skeptics thinking it's worse. Even postal workers at USPS processing centers are frustrated by the sorting nightmare they face. Delivery standards have been reduced from top-down mandates by management. One source tells me mail used to come in today and be gone tonight. Now it comes in, sits and rots, and eventually leaves when the old stuff is pointed out by the workers. Full Measure obtained images of mail sitting not for days but weeks at one processing center. This letter marked "Return to Sender" took 18 days to get attention at the processing center. Seriously, I could have walked it there in less time. I see this sort of thing routinely, says an insider. 44 certified mail letters were found apparently forgotten. A worker on site noted on one letter that The customer paid $10.24 to have it sit in this abandoned tray for 9 days so far. Other certified mail stamped January 29th and 31st was still sitting there 2 weeks later on February 13th. Mail stamped January 8th was still sitting, being stored on February 1st. The mail backup was so large, 23 all-purpose containers were filled with an estimated 184,000 pieces of backlogged mail.
And we're proud public servants.
Dimmenstein, the union president, pins the logjam on a 2021 cost-saving misstep, a pilot program for a regional transportation optimization plan. What's an example of something that could happen with a local letter going to a nearby address before this change?
Well, when I came into the post office in 1983, everything stayed local.
But the pilot program sent local letters on far-flung detours to distant hubs, delaying even next-door deliveries.
I'll give you an example. They had decided to take mail from Medford, Oregon, where there's a small processing plant, to Portland, Oregon. It's a 6-hour truck ride. That's an absurdity. Now, if you're taking a package from Medford, Oregon, and you're sending it to Boston, Massachusetts, it may make perfect sense to consolidate in Portland, fill up the trucks, fill up the airplanes, and it makes the whole process more efficient. But that same package that I'm mailing from Medford to Medford, if it goes on a 6-hour truck ride, it's going to be delayed by at least a day,
each way,
if not more, each way. So those are the kind of things that we certainly have made strong appeals to management on. That is not good service.
A recent Inspector General report criticized the Regional Transportation Optimization Plan, finding that it slowed mail without yielding the promised savings. So back in the olden days, way before your time and before my time, from what I understand, the mail came 6 or 7 days a week. It came twice a day,
yes,
right?
It did at one point.
David Murrow is with the Government Accountability Office, or GAO. It's studied many facets of the Postal Service's problems. What would you say is the current state of the U.S. postal system?
So it's poor. It's in poor financial condition, and it's been that way for a long time.
Is there a simple answer as to why it's existed in such a poor state for such a long time?
So its business model is fundamentally unsustainable.
Financially, the USPS is delivering staggering losses, $9.5 billion in fiscal year 2024 alone. Since 2007, cumulative losses exceed $98 billion, with unfunded liabilities and debt hovering around $143 billion as of 2018.
So most of what their money goes to is compensation to deliver the mail. So that's compensation in terms of pay, that's benefits for their employees, health benefits. That's about 75% of what USPS is paying for. Another 10% or so is for transportation, moving that stuff around the country, and the rest is for everything else, the facilities, the marketing costs, all the other things that USPS does.
The 2021 Delivering for America plan aimed to trim $30 to $36 billion over a decade by consolidating hubs and slower rural delivery. But it's misdelivered, and Postmaster General Louis DeJoy recently resigned. Now President Trump is eyeing a fix, floating a USPS merger with the Commerce Department under Secretary Howard Lutnick.
Well, we want to have a post office that works well and doesn't lose massive amounts of money. And we're thinking about doing that, and it'll be a form of a merger, but it'll remain the Postal Service, and I think it'll operate a lot better than it has been over the years. It's been just a tremendous loser for this country. Tremendous amounts of money are being lost.
What are some of the options that we could do with the Postal Service beyond the current model?
Yeah, so you could have it become a governmental entity again, where Congress basically subsidizes the Postal Service to keep it financially stable. You could privatize all or part of the Postal Service and try and deal with it there. You could do a mix of subsidies for some very specific tasks that the Postal Service does, where it runs like a business, and others. All those are going to have trade-offs, both for the taxpayer and the postal customer, so it's important for Congress to think those through. But the bottom line is the current model doesn't work, so something needs to change.
There's a lot of new talk about privatizing the Postal Service or taking it over or putting it up under the Commerce Department. And I just want the listeners to realize how dangerous that is to their postal services. And the reason it's so dangerous is because the post office, by law, has to go to every single address 6 days a week, and sometimes 7, but by law, 6 days a week. If the post office were to be privatized, and what privatization means, it's going to be broken up and sold off to private corporations who would then make their decisions of where to send, where to go, as to whether they can make a profit.
I've traveled every road in this here land. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man.
After decades of navigating its troubles, the USPS is still trying to find a return address to reliability. The question, can the Trump administration deliver a plan that finally gets it all sorted out?
Cedar City, Dodge City, what a pity. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere.
For more on the story, listen to my podcast, Full Measure, After Hours.